Hello, everybody. A lot of us have been using Next.js, and in fact, I see almost everyone using Next.js for their projects because it's so powerful, so versatile. You can have all your front end and back end written in the same project, and hosting it is so easy on Vercel, or even self hosting is not very difficult. So, all of this makes Next.js very popular. But I also see that a lot of us are not using Next.js to its full potential. That is, there are a lot of amazing features and amazing things that you can do inside Next.js, which we simply don't use. So in this video, I want to cover all of them, at least most of them, which I consider to be very, very powerful and which you should be using in your real applications. Let's get started. So first up is route groups. Now we know that in Next.js, any folder that we create inside the app folder will automatically be converted into a route if it has a page.tsx file, right? Now, a way to organize a code inside the app folder is by using route groups. So route groups are basically you wrap the folder name that you want to keep inside parentheses, and that's it, your route group is created. Now, one of the major advantages of using route groups is, of course, organizing your code. But apart from that, you can actually create multiple route layouts. Multiple route layouts means that you don't need to rely on a single layout that is present inside the root of the app folder. You can actually have multiple layouts. That is, you can have multiple different shared components between different pages and list all of them or create a component out of them inside the layout.jsx file or layout.tsx file. And I feel that is very, very powerful, especially when you're building big scale projects where you have a lot of different components and different sections of the app which you want to be grouped together and have a shared layout. Let's take an example of a project that I'm building called Build a Form. So this is the header of the signed in user. But the header of a not signed in user is a little different, right? I mean, it's pretty different. It doesn't have the status and everything. So the way I'm doing it is that I have two different layouts over here. So over here in my app folder, I have a landing route group, which has a different layout. And I have a app route group, which has a different layout. And these two layouts are what then are used in these different route groups. And yeah, I think route groups just provide an amazing way for you to organize your code and have multiple layouts. So next up is server actions and mutations. Now, server actions, I feel, are very, very powerful and very underutilized right now. The main problem that I feel that people faced or associate server actions with is that only a form can have an action associated with it, and I can easily submit forms without ever having client-side JavaScript running. Now, while this is true, I feel the major power that server actions get is when you're using it inside a non-form element, which means that anytime you need to create a post route for handling any sort of mutations or any sort of thing that do require a post to be sent to your server, you can actually utilize server actions for that. You don't have to create a separate API route for that using Next.js API conventions. You don't have to do anything. You can simply create a server action and you get a type safe mutation ready-made. And that is where I feel server actions become very powerful. So for example, in Build a Form, my project, I have created a lot of actions which I use across my projects. And they are basically server actions which act as post routes. And all of this in a 100% type safe way, which means I know what the response is going to be. I know what it takes in as the body. And yeah, everything just integrates very well. And that is why I feel server actions are very, very powerful. Then next up is not so much as a feature, but as a defensive step, which all of us should take whenever we're using a Next.js project. That is, we must always use this amazing package called server only and React Taint, both of which provide very good defensive mechanisms and make sure that you don't leak any secrets ever from your server side to the client side, or you run any code that was intended to run on the server side only on the client side. And I believe because the boundaries between server and client are so blurred inside Next.js, it's very important to use these packages. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I've already made a video about it in the past, so I'll be linking this and you can go ahead and check it out. For example, I want this code to only run on my server side. I don't want my secrets to ever be leaked or anything to happen ever with this code. That's why I've simply imported a server only package, which will ensure that this code will only run on the server side. For more details about how all of this works and setting it up, you can check my other video. And the fourth thing is not using metadata at all anywhere inside your project. Not having a metadata to show what the project is about, not having a metadata image, or any of these things. And I feel you're missing out a lot on this, because anytime you see beautiful Twitter posts about this product and it has a very beautiful link with an image associated with it, all of this is coming from the metadata. So one of the easiest ways is to actually have a static metadata in the layout component, in the layout.tsx of your root of the app folder. And yeah, I think that is one of the best ways. So let me show you what I have in my layout, in my metadata. So it's very simple. It's like I have listed a few keywords, the title, descriptions, and I've given a few open graph things about what's going on. And I created an open graph image using Canva with the dimensions of 1200 by 630 pixels, and all of this works fine. So for example, because of all the metadata that I've set out in my layout component, this is what it looks like. I have a very beautiful image which I have associated with my project. I have all the description, the name, the title, everything. And you really don't want to miss out on all of this, because they really boost your SEO and they make your website, they give your website a lot of life. All of these things do add up to the look of the website, right? And the other very powerful thing is that whenever you're having dynamic data, or anytime you want to generate the metadata dynamically. So for example, in builder form, one of the features that I want is that because it's a form builder, each form will have its own special link, right? So what I want is that for this special link, I want the name of the form to be rendered on the metadata or the original image, the OG image. So for that, I'll be using something known as dynamic metadata, which will generate the metadata of my route on the fly. And I think that is another powerful feature which a lot of us are missing out on, and we should definitely be using it. Now, another important and powerful feature which I feel a lot of us don't use is the middleware, which basically is a way for you to run any code before the request is completed to get that page. And this is very, very powerful when you're dealing with any authentication checks, or when you want to specify some sort of code that should be run before user visits a specific page. So for example, in my project, I have configured some security rules which are coming from Next.js directly. So it's not a lot of code. So you can make sure that whenever the user is visiting these pages, the Next.js middleware is always run, which is the Next.js checking function of whether the user has signed in or not is always running. And this is in the middleware inside the root of the folder, inside the root of the project. And yeah, I feel middleware are very underutilized. You should be aware of when you want to use middleware, right? So for example, they can also be used in any redirects that you want to do, or logging, analytics, bot detection. There are a lot of other use cases apart from authentication of using middleware. So middleware is something which you should keep in mind, that you have that you have in your back pocket, and it is a very powerful tool which you can pull out and use in important use cases. So next up, we'll be talking about a few special files that are there inside Next.js: loading.tsx, error.tsx, and notfound.tsx. So let's start with loading.tsx because it is by far the most important one. So anytime you're using React server components, you know that they are rendered on the server, and during that time, the navigation of the user is actually not responsive. So the user is actually stuck on the same page when they're trying to navigate to a new server component. And to provide instant loading state, as instant feedback to the user that your request has been registered with us, and we are transitioning you to the new content. That is where loading.tsx plays a massive role. So for example, in this project, the build route is actually a React server component. And when I go over there, it should instantly load. So similarly, even the submissions and the settings page are server components, and when I go to them, I should see a loading skeleton instantly. It's all of this is instant. Instead of waiting for the response to come back, I'm instantly going to that route and showing them the loading.tsx skeleton. So that is what makes loading.tsx very powerful. It just massively enhances the user experience of your product and provides instant feedback whenever you're using React server components. Next up is error.tsx, which is very self-explanatory. It wraps your components in an error boundary. So whenever any errors occur, they are redirected to the error.tsx file, and you can handle errors more gracefully, which is always the sign of a very good application, right? Whenever errors are handled very gracefully, you know that the application has been built very well. And the other one is not found.tsx, which again is a way for you to handle unknown routes. So, for example, I have uh, my own not found page where I can have a custom look about it and go back to home or contact support. And yeah, all of this just enhances the user experience. Now, the seventh and final thing which I want to leave you with is removing console logs from production builds of our Next.js projects. A lot of us use console logs everywhere throughout our project to debug or probably track on what's going on. But sometimes we don't want it on a production build, right? So in that case, we can actually just add a 2-line code of removing the consoles from our production build, and all the console.logs that are present across our project will be removed. Now, of course, you can configure this in a way in which all the console logs are removed except the console errors, because sometimes you do want to log them out. And yeah, I think this is one of the hidden things which a lot of us don't know about. And yeah, very useful. Now, I personally don't use this because I use ESLint to actually restrict me from using console logs, and I rely very heavily on the debugger to actually debug my code rather than console logs. But yeah, this is one of those features which you can use and get away with using console logs everywhere and not actually having to ever remove them from your project. And yeah, that's it for this video. Now, of course, I know that I haven't covered everything. There are a lot of other features, for example, parallel routes or intercepting routes, which I haven't covered as powerful features because I have personally not used them. And I feel that their use cases are very, very niche. You probably won't be using them ever inside your application. So these are a few things which I haven't covered. Of course, you can go through the docs yourself and figure out what's going on. And that's what I recommend as well. Yeah, that's been all for this video.